Hey, good morning, everybody. See you're trickling in. I want to welcome you to our Lead with Compassion virtual webinar series. My name is Val Lance-Geffro, and I'm the Director of Communication Education at the Sanford Institute's Center for Compassionate Communication. And today, we're very excited to welcome the former Senior Vice President of CBS News, Marcy McGinnis. Marcy will lead us through her curriculum preparing for a media interview, and she'll introduce a tool that you can use when you're doing a media interview or really any presentation for the lay public or speaking to anybody outside of your field. We're also joined today by two physicians from UC San Diego who have bravely agreed to do a mock media interview with Marcy, only 2 weeks after they've learned this content in our Train the Trainer fellowship. Dr. Dominique Rash is a board-certified radiation oncologist in the Department of Radiation Medicine and Applied Sciences, where she serves as the residency program director. And Dr. Charlie Coffey is a professor of head and neck surgery and chief of otolaryngology, head and neck surgery. And we're also joined today by the director of our center, Dr. Yvonne Kaplan-Liss, and our spectacular admin, Norma Nava. Before I throw this to Marcy, I just want you to remember that even though we're in a virtual format, we welcome your participation through the use of the chat or the Q&A feature. And Marcy will save time at the end for questions. So Marcy, I'm going to throw this to you, and we're very excited to get started.
Okay. Well, thank you, Val. Thank you for that kind introduction. And I'm really excited to be here. Thank you all for coming to this webinar. It's very exciting that you guys want to learn how to do a media interview, in particular a television interview, which is what we're going to concentrate on today. So before we get started, I wanted to do a little poll, and Norma is going to help me by putting up this poll. And if you just take a second to answer this one question, I just want to get an idea of what level of experience any of you have had with doing any kind of media interview, television or print or whatever. So just look at this, see what your experience with media interviews is, and click one of them if you would, so that we can have an idea. No experience, preparing for your first one. Oh my God, I'm too shy. I have some experience, but I want to improve. I've had some bad experiences. I don't trust reporters, or I'm great. Norma's going to tell us when we get to see the results. Okay, let's look. Okay, what is your experience with media interviews? 19% have no experience at all. It looks like no one's preparing, no one's too shy. That's good to know. Some experience, but want to improve. That's great. 63% of you have some experience. I'm really excited to hear that. I have some experience, but they haven't been good, just a small portion. And then 2 people said they were great at media interviews, but want to learn new tools. So 2 people, and I'd say the majority have some experience, but want to improve. Okay, great. That gives me an idea. All righty. So again, let me just briefly tell you that I've spent my life in television, a long career at CBS News. I've trained many, many people to be on camera and to be able to do interviews, and also how to conduct interviews and how to be the recipient of interviews. So I've got lots of experience and happy to share it with you. So I'm going to share my screen now. And here we are. Okay, so I'm going to get started right away. I want to start with the agenda, just so you know everything that we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about why you should even say yes. So Many of you might be asking, why do I have to be on? Why do I have to do this? It's like it's driving me crazy. I just want to like talk to my colleagues and my friends and my family. And why do I have to go through the anxiety of doing a media interview? Why go through, all of this fear? So that's one of the things we're going to be talking about is why you should say yes. I'm also going to help you talk about before you agree what you're going to ask the people who call you to ask you be on the air. Um, the agenda will also include, as Val mentioned, this game tool strategy. It's a tool that I created and is really, really useful in preparing for media interviews or conversations. I want to talk about the role of the interviewer. That's really important for you to understand before you even say yes. I'm going to give you some tips on getting on camera ready. After all, it's a visual medium, so you're going to have to be camera ready. I'm going to help you prepare your content. This is actually all about the message and lots of different bits of information that you want to include in your message. Speaking of your message, how you deliver your message is going to be very important. So we want to talk about some tips for how to be effective in your delivery. And I'm going to give you a few tips on boosting your own self-confidence, which is going to be important before you go on the air. After that, we're going to practice with our two physicians, and I'm going to be taking some Q&A. So that's our agenda. And why don't we get right to it? So let's talk about why you should say yes in the first place. As I mentioned, you might be filled with anxiety when somebody's talking about a media interview and you say, why do I have to do this? I just want to be with my colleagues. I want to be with my family. I don't want to have to do this. But, there's a really important reason. And that is that you guys have a lot of information to share with the public that they can then use to make smart decisions in their lives. And they want you because you are the expert. You're the one that's got insight and critical information to share. And it's important that the public be able to hear from an expert. Why do a television audience? The scale of a television audience can be huge. It can be thousands or even millions. So the idea of you getting your information out to that many people in one fell swoop is really, really important. And it's so useful because, I mean, you can talk one-on-one with people, but being able to reach thousands or millions of people in one interview is extraordinary and really helpful. The other thing you can do is you can make your complex information that you have relatable. And I don't mean dumb it down. I mean that you've got information that the public might find very, very complex. And you are going to be able to distill it in a way that they'll be able to relate to it. And then they'll have this critical information that they can then use to make decisions in their own lives and also to share that information with other people. So if you've given them information in a relatable way, hopefully they'll also be able to share it with other people that they're talking with. And hopefully you will be able to inspire action. You'll be able to inspire people to do something about whatever it was that you had to say. So let's talk about before you agree. So someone calls you, say it's a producer from a local television station, for example, or you don't know where they work. They're just somebody on the phone saying, will you come be on our air? So the first thing you want to know is who's calling me and what outlet do they represent? This is important because you want to know if it's a network. If it's a network like ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, that means the interview will go across the whole nation at the same time. That's a very, very big audience. If it's a local person calling you from, say, the San Diego area, and they are going to air this on a local San Diego station, then you'll know that the audience is going to be a smaller audience, still thousands, but in the local San Diego area. The other thing you want to ask is, why do they want me? Like, why do they want you to be on this air? And I don't say that cynically. I just say why it's important for you to find out. You might assume they want you because you're working on some research and, maybe they've heard about it and they want to talk to you about it. But they may have you on for a totally different reason. Maybe they've read about you, or maybe they're talking about general medicine as opposed to your specialty. It's important that you understand why it is they asked for you in particular, and you just asked that question. The other thing you want to know is this interview going to be live or is it going to be taped? And how long is it going to be? So just to give you an idea, if it's a live interview, it's probably going to be in the 4 to 5 minute range. Not a lot of time, but enough to get your information across. If it's going to be taped, oftentimes that means that they might come to your office and tape an interview with you that could go 20 minutes, could go 15, 20 minutes, half an hour. But here's the thing, when a taped interview, you won't know what they're going to use when they do the story on the air because they'll edit it in an edit room later. So it's important for you to know these things just so that you have an idea of what information it is you want to get out, especially right at the top of the interview. You want to know when it's going to air. Why is this a big deal? Because it's important for you to understand the audience. If it's a morning audience, they're really busy and they're not watching the TV like they do, say, in the evening or on a Sunday morning. So it's important for you to know the attention span of the people that might be watching at, say, 7 in the morning versus 7 in the evening. I keep mentioning the audience. It's really, really important to know who you're speaking to. Who's that audience that this outlet represents? Again, is it a national audience? Is it a local audience? Is it mostly female audience? These are questions that you can ask the person who's calling you. They won't mind. They want to answer your questions. It's okay. You want to ask them if you're going to be the only person in the segment. So many times you'll see, if you're watching a show, you'll see they're talking about a certain subject and they'll have two experts on. And one's talking about one part of it and the other one's talking about another. It's important for you to say, am I the only person that you're going to be speaking with in this segment? And, or is there going to be somebody else? And if there's someone else, can you tell me who that is and what their angle is going to be so that I don't step over them and be redundant? And then here's a really good question to ask. What do you want the viewers to learn from this interview that you're doing with me? The reason you want to ask that is because chances are they won't give you the exact questions ahead of time. At the networks, like at CBS, we're not allowed to give a list of questions to people before the interview. But that doesn't mean we don't tell them the gist of the interview. So if you say, what are the things that you want the viewer to learn from the interview with me? Their answers will basically give you an idea of what the questions are going to be. So don't be afraid if they won't give you a list of the questions that you can't figure it out. You can figure it out by simply asking them, well, what is it that you'd love the viewers to learn? So those are all the questions that you could ask before when someone calls. Like I said, chances are either a producer will call you, most likely, or sometimes a reporter directly will call you. And don't be afraid to ask these kinds of questions before you agree. Okay, so Val mentioned the game tool, and I want to tell you a little bit about this strategy tool that's going to be helpful whether you're doing a media interview, a conversation, a presentation. It's just one of these tools that's really going to help you in any kind of communication with another person or persons. And I call it the game tool. The G stands for goal. The A stands for audience. The M stands for message, and the E stands for engagement. Goal, audience, message, engagement. Let's start with the G. So the goal is what you want your particular audience to think, to feel, and to do after they've heard this interview or after they've had this conversation. Today, we're concentrating on an interview. So what do you want the particular audience that's watching this interview to think, to feel, and to do after they've seen the interview? Who is that audience and why should they care? So when you're preparing to get ready, when you're getting ready for the interview and you're thinking about what I'm going to say, you have to think, who are they? Are they a local audience? Are they a national audience? Are they primarily a female audience? Are they primarily a mixed audience? Who's the audience and why should they really care about what it is I have to say? And you think about that and you're preparing, these are really paramount. Then we get to the message. This is basically what it is you're going to say. And I've broken this down to one big idea, which is your main point. The main point you want to get across is your one big idea. And then three key points are the three things that you would love them to remember after the interview. I'm sorry to tell you that people remember only one or two, maybe three things after they've had a conversation or after they've heard somebody speak or after they've watched an interview. So it's really important that before you do the interview, you prepare by saying to yourself, okay, what is my one big idea? What's my main point? And then what are three sub points that I want this audience to remember after they've seen this interview? And then engagement, the E stands for engagement. This is all about making a connection to that audience. So the way you present, the way you use your voice, your body language, the way you look, the way you sound, all of that matters. That we want your passion for your topic to come through to the audience. This is all about engaging the audience. And you know what this is like. You know, you've seen an interview or you've seen a presenter who's more boring than life itself, and you've seen somebody who really engages you. And so that's why it's important for you to think about, okay, I need to have this passion come through. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later too. So just as a recap, goal, audience, message, and engagement. So let me give you a quick example of how this might work. A few years ago, I was helping a doctor, an OB/GYN, with a media interview that he was going to do. A study had recently come out that said recommendations for women getting their first mammograms was being raised to the age of 50 from a lower age. And this particular physician was very upset because he did believe that the study was flawed, and he believed very strongly that mammograms save lives and that the younger you get them, the better it is. So his goal, what he wanted the audience to think, feel, and do, he wanted that audience to know that mammograms save lives. He wanted them to know that it was important to get mammograms at an early age. So and then he wanted them to get mammograms. So he wanted them to think that it was important. He wanted them to feel an urgency, and then he wanted them to actually do it. The audience he was talking to, which was really a good audience, was a morning audience. So this was a morning audience on a news show, and it was a news show that had primarily a female audience. Most of the shows, like Good Morning America, the Today Show, even Good Morning San Diego, those kinds of shows have a lot of female audience. So this was why should they care? Who was the audience and why should they care? They should care because they're female or they have females in their family. They have mothers, aunts, sisters, daughters, whatever. So the reason they should care is because mammograms save lives. So the message, what was his big idea and the three key points? His big idea was mammograms save lives. The three key points was that the study that they were talking about was flawed, that younger women were getting breast cancer. There were studies that showed that women that were getting breast cancer were starting at an earlier age, and that he wanted women to get mammograms starting at 40. So that was his key point and his key big idea and his three key points. And then the way he told this was with great passion because he felt so strongly about it. He had all of his facts in line for how he could prove that the study had been flawed. And he was, we worked on his body language and his voice and his face and the way he told this message. So that's kind of an example of how to use the game tool. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about the role of the interviewer. Because this is important. You know, you find out you're going to be interviewed, you want to know who's going to do the interview. That's one of the questions that you're going to ask. So maybe it's the anchor of a show. Now, anchors of shows, they're the kinds of people who know a little about a lot. They don't know a lot about a little. So the anchors are people who often get the questions that they're going to ask the person that they're going to interview. They get them like either right before the interview or maybe they get them the night before, but they're not spending a huge amount of time on them. So I tell you that only because they they're going to ask you kind of basic questions that the producer has handed them, and their expertise is not anywhere close to yours. If you get interviewed, if you're going to be interviewed by a medical or a science a beat reporter means that it's a reporter assigned to a special beat, like the medical beat, the science beat, the financial beat, the climate beat. So if you are going to be interviewed by one of those reporters who understands medicine and science a little bit more than the average bear, then they might know a little bit more about your topic. So I just tell you that just so that you know that who you might be talking to, what their level of experience in terms of your topic might be. They are always asking questions on behalf of the audience. So don't get too wrapped up in that person you're actually talking to. That person is representing that big audience behind him or her. Um, and they are there to help you explain your message to the viewers. Now, today we're going to be talking about an interview that is not a gotcha kind of interview. It's a very basic news interview. So if I was talking to you about the kind of way to prepare for a quote gotcha interview, one of those controversial interviews, it would be a different set of it's a different set of information. So right now, today, we're preparing for just a regular news interview. And they're there, the reporter is there to help you. They want the interview to go well. Their bosses are watching. They know their colleagues are watching. They care about the interview going well. So they're not there in this particular kind of instance to try to trap you or trip you up. They will share the goal with you, as I mentioned earlier, even though they're probably not going to share the questions with you. But as I told you, you'll be able to get the gist of what it is that they're talking about. Okay, let's talk about some tips to get ready. Okay. Some on-camera tips. As I mentioned earlier, television is a visual medium. So it matters what you look like. It matters how you present yourself on television. It's just the facts. Okay, so it's important for you to dress appropriately for the time of day that you're going to be interviewed. So if you're going to be interviewed in the morning, gentlemen might not need to wear a suit. You can just wear a jacket with an open shirt, or maybe your medical white jacket. So it's just remember to look appropriate for that time of day. You want to dress simply. No busy patterns. The camera plays havoc with busy patterns, and it does something called pixelating. So you've probably seen it when a camera kind of makes all kinds of little, weird, it's called pixels. So you don't want to have any busy patterns. You don't want distractions. So big scarves or earrings or hair that keeps falling in your face. You want to just stay away from that. The reason is that people will get distracted by it, and then they will start not listening to what you have to say because they're too busy watching, looking at your crazy outfit or your huge earrings or, some weird thing that you're wearing. The best colors for television are solid colors. They can be primary colors or they can be pastels. Just don't wear green. Green, you've heard of things called a green screen. That's a term that we use in television. A green screen is it's a screen that the television people project like weather maps on, and if you stand in front of it and you're wearing green, it will disappear, whatever you're wearing. So don't wear green, but any solid color, primary or pastel, is going to look nice. If you're on Zoom, you want to have your camera at eye level. You want to have your shoulders in the frame. You don't want to have any ceiling fans. You don't want to have clutter in the background. You can blur your background, or if you have a nice background, you can leave it. That's fine. But just make sure that it looks neat. You don't want to have your bathrobe hanging on the back of the door, or anything again that's going to be distracting to the viewer. If you're on Zoom, you want to light your face from the front. So you want to face a window. Never, ever, ever have a window behind you because it will light the back and then your front will be dark. Okay, so you know how to look. And so now it's important to think about the content. So you've thought about your one big idea and your three key points. So that's important. That's your message. But now let's think about your content within that one big idea and your three key points. You're going to anticipate the questions so that you're ready ahead of time with any kind of examples, facts, statistics, interesting, unusual, and unexpected info, and an anecdote. These are all bits of content that you want to have prepared ahead of time. You might not use them all, but just have some things handy because it's important for you to be able to fall back on examples. People love examples. Well, I just gave you an example for the game tool. So I taught you the game tool, and then I gave you an example of the OGBYN doctor who wanted to use that game tool. So the other thing the audience loves, they love interesting, unusual, unexpected things that they hadn't expected. And so that's a cool thing to have handy. And anecdotes or stories. So people love stories. The whole thing about journalism and about getting your message across to an audience, it's all about telling your story. So having an anecdote, like I did with the doctor, is going to be useful for you. And then identify ahead of time a call to action. This is part of the what do you want the audience to do? So it might be something as simple as, I hope your audience takes this information and shares it with their neighbors. Or I hope your audience contributes to this foundation that I've been talking about during this interview and helps get interest growing for our cause. Whatever the call to action is, I want your audience to get mammograms by the age of 40. Those are call to action. So identify that. All of this stuff that you're looking at right now, your big idea, your three key points, anticipating the questions, and all of these other things, is stuff that you should gather ahead of time. All this is in your back pocket. Because then it matters how you deliver your material, how you deliver your message. Now, here's an important point for television. In television, you want to use really short, clear sentences and have one idea at a time. So if I'm doing an interview with you and I ask you a question, I want you to answer just that question. There's a tendency sometimes for people to go on and on. And next thing you know, a 5-minute interview has got maybe 2 questions. Or one question, God help us if the person has gone on and on and on talking. So you want to answer in short, clear sentences and let the reporter ask you the follow-up question. I promise you, that's what reporters do. They love to ask follow-up questions. So keep your answer to one idea at a time. Jargon in your industry is rampant, as it is in every industry. I could talk to you for a few minutes and use language that only my TV colleagues would understand, and you wouldn't understand it at all. Same thing with medicine and science. There's a lot of jargon in there. Try to stay away from it. If you do slip and use a piece of jargon, just explain it really quickly so that the audience doesn't get trapped in trying to figure out what it was and then miss what you have to say going forward. That's why you want to avoid jargon, because when you say something that they don't understand, they're trying to figure it out and they miss what you say next. You want to show your passion and your enthusiasm. Again, I mentioned this earlier. You want to be able to use your voice and your facial expressions and your hand motions and just anything that's going to show you really care about this. You don't have to be over the top, but you also can't be with a monotone where it is really important for people to get mammograms at the age of 40. I hope you all will. I mean, that's like, people aren't going to be encouraged to go do it if that kind of delivery happens. So you want to show your passion using your voice, using your face, using your hands. Another trick to help get an audience to sit up and pay attention are by using things that we call flags. So a flag is something like the most important thing for you, for your audience to remember is, or the bottom line is, or if I could have your audience just remember one thing, it would be this. It's it's a way to have the audience, if they're busy, like a morning audience, they might stop and listen because you're about to tell them something important. The other thing this helps is it helps the reporter know that you're about to say something really important. And that person can then reiterate it or ask a question off of it. So if you want to flag you one of your key points, keep that in mind and have that at the ready. The other thing that's always useful in a television interview is referring to your audience. So, for example, with my doctor with the mammograms, he was talking to a morning audience. He knew that it was a lot of females watching that audience, and even males that were watching that would have females in their lives, obviously. So referring to the audience, him saying something like, I really hope that the people watching understand mammograms save lives. So talk to your, get your mammogram if you're 40. Make sure that you tell your wife, tell your children, tell the females in your life. So it's referring to the audience as a way that you can get people engaged. Always be ready to pivot to your key points. If somebody were to ask you something that you didn't know, a lot of people say, well, what if they ask me something I don't know? If they ask you something you don't know, it's perfectly fine to say, that's not my area of expertise, but what I can tell you is, and then you pivot back to something that you do know that's related, then this is a way that you can pivot back to your key points. Don't forget to breathe. Sometimes when we're doing an interview, we literally stop breathing. So before you start the interview, take some deep breaths. And during the interview, don't forget to breathe. Okay, so now I want to talk to you about building your own self-confidence. The fact of the matter is you have earned the right to be interviewed for this television audience. You are an expert. So that's what's important for you to know. You're the expert. You're the one with the information. And so it's important for you to understand that you have the confidence that you have information that you want to share with others. And those others are your audience. So you want to concentrate on the audience, not on yourself. If you've prepared your content the way I talked about it, and you've prepared your how you look, then it's time to concentrate on what it is you want that audience to think, to feel, and to do. What is it you want that audience to react to what to do with the information that you're going to give them? So that way, when you get yourself stopping thinking about yourself, because you've already prepared, you've got your content prepared, you've got your outfit prepared, you're all ready. So just concentrate on what information you want that audience to know. Before you do the interview, visualize success. Picture yourself doing a strong interview. You can do it. You deserve it. You are the expert. You have information that people need to be able to make smart decisions in their lives. You will be nervous. There's no doubt about it. No matter how many times somebody goes on TV, I'm telling you, even anchors that have been doing it forever, they still get nervous, and that's all totally normal. Ask people you trust for guidance and encouragement. Maybe do some mock interviews before. But most importantly, just be yourself. Be the regular person that you are, telling somebody, think about yourself when you're at a dinner table or you're, in a coffee shop and somebody asks you a question and you're just telling them the answer. So just try to be yourself. All right. So the most important thing I want you to remember from this interview, if there's one thing I want my audience to remember, it's the game tool. Okay? The goal, what you want that audience to think, feel, or do. Who are they and why should they care? What's your one big idea and your 3 key points? And how can I make a connection? That's what I want you to remember the most from this interview. So now I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to do a little practicing. And at the same point, why don't maybe we'll take a few Q&A, then we'll do a little practice, and then we'll take some more Q&A. Does that work? Okay, let me stop sharing and I'll come on camera to answer a few questions, and then we're going to do our mock interview with our kind physicians who have agreed to do this to help me.
Marcy, I'm looking in the chat and the Q&A, and we only have had one question right now, so you must be answering questions as they're coming. I think we can go ahead and do the mock media interview, but as you're listening, if you do have questions, make sure you put them in the chat, and we'll get to them after Dr. Rash and Dr. Coffey have both demonstrated.
Okay. All right, Dr. Rash, let's start with you.
Hello.
Hi, Dr. Rash, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Okay, I'm going to start my old stopwatch. So I'm going to make this probably about 4 minutes or so. Okay. Good morning, Dr. Rash, and welcome to Good Morning San Diego.
Good morning, Marcy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Dr. Rash, you deal with cervical cancer. How big a problem is cervical cancer in the US?
That's right. Yeah, we actually have about 14,000 women that are diagnosed with cervical cancer here in the US per year.
You know, it's really kind of an overwhelming diagnosis when you hear about that you might have cervical cancer. Um, is it a death sentence? And tell me a little bit about the treatment.
Yeah, so thanks to early detection methods like our pap smears and the good, robust screening that we have in the United States, most women are diagnosed at a very early stage. And with that, the cure rates are as high as 90% or higher. But even for women who get diagnosed at a later time, for whatever reason, cervical cancer can still be highly curable, as high as 85 to 90% in that setting. But it does require a combination of both chemotherapy as well as radiation. And that's where my expertise comes in. I'm a radiation oncologist that uses both external radiation and an internal form of radiation called brachytherapy, which are crucial components to curing women of their cancer.
Okay, so wow. Chemotherapy, we're all kind of aware of that. And then, as you mentioned, external radiation, which we're all pretty familiar with. But the internal radiation is something that maybe our audience isn't quite as familiar with. Can you explain what exactly that procedure is about?
Yeah, so internal radiation, funnily enough, has been around for since the early 1900s. It's one of the earliest forms of radiation that we've used to treat cancer. And what it involves is taking a little radioactive source and applying it directly inside the tumor, which is quite remarkable in that it's really able to minimize the side effects from treatment because you're putting the radiation directly where it counts, inside the tumor.
So, other external radiation, what it has to travel through other organs to get to the tumor?
Yes, external radiation can be quite nice. It's just like getting a CAT scan or an X-ray. You lay down on a table, there's a beam of light that shines on your body, and you really don't feel anything. It's a very non-invasive form of treatment. And that approach is fantastic when we need to treat a broad area. So it's kind of like spray painting a wall. You can cover a large amount of area with effective treatment. But then when we want to give more targeted treatment, kind of like a painter coming in with a paintbrush and applying the paint directly in precise areas, that's where the internal radiation comes to play.
And so is this a common treatment? Most hospitals have this kind of treatment, or is it pretty specialized?
Complex brachytherapy or internal radiation is actually usually delivered at high volume academic centers. It can be quite specialized. So, for any woman diagnosed with cervical cancer, it's really important that you're being seen at a center that specializes in delivering complex internal radiation.
Now, if there's women who don't live near a large, place like, your hospital, what can they do? Are they, not going to be able to get internal radiation?
The good news is when we use the internal radiation, it typically only involves anywhere from 2 to 5 treatments. So being located next to a facility that does the internal radiation isn't necessary. There are opportunities to travel perhaps up to an hour or so away from your hometown where you can have access to an academic or a large volume center that does the complex brachytherapy.
So, so for women that are watching who might have been just recently diagnosed with cervical cancer, what's the most important thing you want them to know?
What I really want your audience members to know is that brachytherapy or internal radiation is a crucial important for treating successfully their cervical cancer, which we can cure. 85 to 90% of the time we can cure it, but it can be scary and intimidating. And so I really want your audience members to feel empowered to go meet with their doctor and talk about how internal radiation is an important part of their care.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning with this really important information for all of our viewers.
Thank you very much for having me, Marcy.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Hey, let me ask you a quick question while I have you. What was your big idea and your 3 key points?
Well, my big idea was that internal radiation is a crucial component of cervical cancer care. And then the 3 additional points, which I probably wasn't as adept at getting across, was one, um, that it's a very targeted treatment that can sound intimidating, but actually results in fewer side effects than some other forms of treatment. 2, that we need to be training more brachytherapists at high volume centers so people in the community have access to the internal radiation. And then 3, that we're all encouraging our patients, our sisters, our mothers, our daughters to get screened for cervical cancer so that we can treat it effectively.
Great. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
All right. Let's hear from Dr. Coffey. Dr. Coffey, if you will.
Hi, Marcy.
How are you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Okay. So I'm not going to attempt to say the specialty that you do. I'll just say you're a head and neck surgeon.
Perfect.
Okay. Good morning, Dr. Coffey, and welcome to Good Morning San Diego.
Good morning, Marcy. Thanks so much for having me.
Dr. Coffey, you are a head and neck surgeon, and you're here to talk to us about how to get the best outcomes out of any kind of surgery or any kind of disease that affects the head and the neck. Tell me how big a problem head and neck cancers are in the US.
I think it's a bigger problem than many people recognize. About 110,000 people will be diagnosed with one form or another of head and neck cancer in the United States this year. About 20,000 Americans will die of head and neck cancer this year. So, in part because of the variety of different types of diseases, I think a lot of people don't see the whole picture and understand how relatively common these disease types are.
Why is this particular cancer considered so complex?
Yeah, I like to think of the head and neck region as high-end real estate, right? There's so much of what happens in our daily lives that happens right here, how we interact with the world, both in communication, how we present ourselves to the world, eating, drinking, swallowing, taste, hearing, sight. It goes on and on. And so even relatively small tumors that impact some of these regions in a significant way can have dramatic impacts on quality of life. And similarly, the treatments that we use to cure these tumors can significantly impact quality of life.
So when you talk about treatment, are you talking about surgery? I mean, you're a surgeon?
I am indeed a surgeon, and that is a big part of treatment for many of these tumors, but by no means the only treatment. Surgery can play a mainstay. Radiation therapy can play a very important role, and in many cases, a mainstay of treatment for these tumors. Chemotherapy or newer immunotherapies can also play an important role. And in fact, increasingly, we're finding that combinations of therapy and certain sequences are given together give the most effective outcomes for our patients.
So what advice do you have for people watching who maybe have dealing with, someone in their family with this kind of cancer?
Sure. I think the really most important thing to understand is that because head and neck cancers can be so complex and have such important impacts, the treatment team is really critical to ensuring that patients have the best outcome possible. There is no one specialist or expert, regardless of their degree of expertise or how long they've been practicing. No one person can really fully provide all of the care that most head and neck cancer patients need. It requires multiple experts working in concert to best understand an individual patient, their disease, and then offer the best treatment options for that person.
So who's on this team?
Yeah, it's a very broad team in most cases. So, including physicians like surgeons, medical oncologists, specialized radiation oncologists, as well as all of the people that play critical roles in supporting patients through treatment and rehabilitation, like speech and language pathologists or swallowing specialists, dietitians, rehabilitation specialists like occupational and physical therapists, and then specialized, pathologists and radiologists as well. So really broad teams, and it goes out even farther than that, but you get the idea.
I do get the idea, and it's kind of overwhelming because I'm thinking, okay, I've got this horrible cancer, and now I'm supposed to think about all of these different people. Is it my job to ask about each of those individual things, a nutritionist and a speech pathologist? What do I do? How do I get empowered to kind of even speak up?
You're right. That can be overwhelming, and it's absolutely not the job of any individual patient, person, or family to really navigate that out. That is where I think it is most helpful that patients understand how they can go about finding that team care. One option would be to go online, for instance, something like cancer.gov, which is where patients and families can find lists of all of the centers across the country that specialize in this type of team or multidisciplinary care for patients with any range of cancers, including head and neck cancers. Another option is simply to show up at that first visit and ask, who's on my team? Who's going to be taking care of me, right? And if the answer is, one or two people, maybe that's, reason for a little concern. Whereas if someone starts to go through that whole list that we just talked about and says, these are the 8 or the 12 people that are going to be actively participating in your care, that's a way to get that reassurance that you are, in fact, being treated in multidisciplinary, holistic fashion.
Fantastic. And as we know, obviously you are at UCSD and you work in this kind of team environment.
That's right. So right here in San Diego, Gleberman Head and Neck Cancer Center is one of these National Comprehensive Cancer Centers, as I mentioned. So it's a great option for patients who either live in San Diego or are able to travel and receive care here.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much for the work that you do, Dr. Coffey, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Marcy. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay. Thank you for that. All right.
I wonder if I could just jump in with a couple of questions. First of all, thank you, Dr. Coffey and Dr. Rash, for jumping in and doing these interviews in front of people. That's an intimidating thing to do. How did you feel like they went, or in thinking about the tool and the didactic that Marcy shared with us, what were some things that that you thought you did well, and what are some things that you wish you could have changed next time?
I can start by criticizing myself, unless Dominique wants to criticize me. I thought it went well on the whole, in that I got my big idea across and some of the key points that I really wanted to incorporate. I didn't get in examples, and I had prepared for that, but I just didn't find a way to really weave that in as well as I would have liked to. And I think maybe that speaks to the fact that even if you do a similar interview several times in a row, maybe the flow is going to be a little bit different. The question's going to be different. So it's definitely important to be prepared to go slightly different directions and maybe ultimately be content with the fact that you might not get all your ideas in there, but if you're getting the key points, hopefully that's enough.
Another idea is keeping an answer to the question shorter and throwing in your examples. So when I said, what do I do if I've got this? You say, well, let me give you an example. I had a young woman come into me and blah, blah, blah.
That's great.
Sometimes your example can answer the question.
That's great.
That's great. Thank you. Dominique.
Yeah, actually, I echo a lot of what Charlie just said. I felt like there were some key points that I wanted to get across, specifically about how We are undertraining people in brachytherapy, in that in general, we want to devote more resources to having more specialists to broaden access to that care. Oh, here I am already elaborating on this point. But anyway, so I felt like I was talking quite a bit, but without getting to one of my key take-home points.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit on that, because when we think about the audience and what they care about, there's not too much an audience can do about whether more doctors are being trained in this. So it might produce more anxiety for the audience, thinking, uh-oh, she's saying that there aren't enough people trained in it, I'm not going to be able to get it. So that information is better for an audience who can do something about it. Maybe you're talking to the board of a hospital, or maybe you're talking, to whoever can help solve that problem. It's not the women in the audience who are listening to the what to do if they've got cervical cancer. So I think it was okay that you steered away. You mentioned it, but steered away from, didn't concentrate on that, because the women in the audience care about where can I get it and how can I get it.
Yeah, I think it's really salient, the points you were making, particularly in the training, about knowing who your audience is, knowing what the goal of the interview is about. I think I've had, colleagues in media interviews actually get quite tripped up by not having that understanding ahead of time. And so going through this training, going through this course has been like invaluable in terms of not just knowing your subject matter and knowing what the points are that you want to get across, but also understanding the context in which you're delivering this information.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you.
We have a couple questions from the audience. One from a question: do you recommend any type of pause in between the question being given and the question being answered?
That's a really good question, and I would say it's fine to pause. In fact, some people just jump in and start answering because they're very nervous, and it's fine. Take a beat and then answer the question. So it's fine to take a pause. It also helps with verbal tics. It helps you from saying so or like. So it's a nice way to help you gather your thought. Just say, you don't want to sit too long in a pause because people will think you've had a stroke. But I think it's yes, it's perfectly fine and can be helpful.
And then one more question. Do you have any suggestions on how to steady your voice when presenting? My nerves make my voice shaky. It's a good question.
Sure, I think that you can record it. Do a mock interview with someone, have someone play the role of the reporter, record it, listen to it, and see where you feel your voice is shaky. Sometimes what you perceive your voice to be doing isn't necessarily what it actually is doing. So if you record it and then have your colleague or your friend listen to it with you, and they can be honest with, yeah, you were a little bit shaky there, or I didn't really hear it. I'm not sure you're feeling it, but it's not coming out. So I would just record it and listen to it, and have someone you trust listen to it with you.
Awesome.
Maybe by way of reassurance, I found that I feel the same when I'm standing in front of an audience and I'm the only one speaking and everybody. But in this format, it is much more conversational, and so at least for me, I think it does help relax that that anxiety and that vocal tremor a little.
Exactly.
I'm with you. Okay. Any final comments from you, Charlie or Dominique, before we sign off?
I just can't thank Marcy enough. I think these, very simple framework makes a world of difference in being able to get the message across clearly to the audience. And it doesn't take years and years, not that either of us can claim the expertise of Marcy or most, media professionals, but like it's pretty simple things to put into practice in a pretty, discrete time frame.
Yeah, and similarly, a few rounds, it doesn't take years of practice to be able to refine and deliver these messages more effectively. Just a few rounds of practice, I feel like has already kind of helped clarify how best to deliver this information.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for taking time out of your very busy day to share your wisdom with us. And Marcy, thank you for a great session. Lots of information that's easy to digest and easy to imagine practicing. And we've gotten a number of people in the chat wanting to know how they can get access to this. I'm here to reassure everybody that this will all be available. This recording will be available on our website. And Marcy's tool will also be available as a free download. So we'll have those things available for you. And Norma, if you wouldn't mind pulling up our final slide, I just want to remind you that this is an ongoing monthly series. We're seeing your presenter mode, but that's okay. Our next virtual, there we go. Okay. Our next virtual workshop is November 6th. It's called Raise Your Voice, How to Write Op-Eds and Letters to the Editor. And this will be presented by our good friend, Elizabeth Bass, who was the founding director of the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science at Stony Brook University. We also have our Lead with Compassion workshop. Registration is open for that. And that is a 2-day immersive conference for healthcare professionals. And it has a lot of content that that I think would be helpful for you if you're a change maker in your university. Marcy, do you have any final comments for us before we hit the road?
I would only thank your audience for the incredible work that they do. It is life-saving, it is critical, and I just want the message to get out. This is why it's so important for you to say yes to an interview that will reach thousands or millions of people, because it's important, and we need that information that you have. So thank you for the work you do, and thank you for giving thought to the idea of doing a media interview to get that message across.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. I also will mention that that Marcy is a consultant and available for private coaching if you're interested in that, and we can put her contact information on our website, or you can find we can lead you to her if you want to contact us. We hope to see you again next month, and have a good day. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks again, Marcy. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. It was great.
Likewise.